Karmanam,
Karmanam,
of the performers.
Jnana,
Knowledge. Sanchinna, cut by the advancement of knowledge. Samshayam, doubts. Atmavantam, situated in the self. Na, never. Karmani, work. Nibadhanti, do bind up. Dhananjaya, O conqueror of riches. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Therefore, one who has renounced the fruits of his action, whose doubts are destroyed by transcendental knowledge, and who is situated firmly in the self, is not bound by works, O conqueror of riches. Translation with repetition. Therefore, one who has renounced the fruits of his action, whose doubts are destroyed by transcendental knowledge, and who is situated firmly in the self, is not bound by works, O conqueror of riches. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. One who follows the instruction of the Gita as it is imparted by the Lord, the personality of Godhead himself, becomes free from all doubts by the grace of transcendental knowledge. He, as a part and parcel of the Lord, in full Krishna consciousness, is already established in self-knowledge. As such, he is undoubtedly above bondage to action. Thus ends the Transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this verse is starting with the word therefore. So basically, this is in continuation from the past couple of verses, which are describing about transcendental knowledge, the glories of transcendental knowledge. And more specifically, in the last verse, there was this description of three kinds of people. Agnaha, the fools who have no knowledge of the standard scriptures. Or Ashraddhanaha, men who do not have faith in revealed scriptures. So one, Agnaha, that means people who do not even know that there is some standard scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. There are many who actually have no idea that there are some books which can describe all the questions of life. Then other class of people, although they know that there is something known as Bhagavad Gita, there is something as Srimad Bhagavatam, but Ashraddhanaha, they have no faith. They think that this is not true. This is mythology. This is some sort of a story that needs to be speculated, that is not to be taken literally. It is meant for some sort of imagination. And then there are some there is another class of people who are Samshayatma. So Samshayatma means they doubt the scriptures. So they do not accept, they do not take everything, they doubt the scriptures. So some portions where their rationality agree, they may take some things, but other places they will doubt. Is it really true? If I surrender to Krishna, will I get everything? Is it really true? Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they have so many doubts. So in the last verse, it was described that all these three classes of people, Agnaha, Ashraddhadanaha, and Samshayatma. So these people never find happiness either in this world nor in the next. So they are always troubled. They always are in anxiety. They're always struggling. So a verse before that, the verse spoke about a person who is faithful, not doubtful, who is faithful, who understands this transcendental knowledge. And when one understands this transcendental knowledge and subdues his senses, he immediately attains supreme peace. So there is one category of people who attain supreme peace very easily. Then there is description of another category of people who never attain peace, neither in this life nor the next. Neither they can be happy in this or the next. Now, moving on from there, it is now coming towards the conclusion of this fourth chapter, which is transcendental knowledge. So there is one more verse after this. So in short, these are like summary verses, which are kind of summarizing a lot of things. So here, therefore, it is being recommended. So there are different classes of people. But now, in conclusion, the verses are trying to bring here how one can perform one's activities, how one can perform one's activities without being bound up by the activities that one is performing. So let us look at today's verse. It is said, Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam. So here it is saying, one who has renounced the fruits of his action. So when one is performing activities without any attachment to the fruit of his work. So usually in the material world, everyone is working so hard so that they can get some fruit. But here, the kind of work is, he is detached from the fruit of his action. And second thing that is being mentioned here is Jnana Sanchinna Samshayam. So there are doubts. People always have so many doubts. But how one can cut off the doubts, doubts which are cut off by transcendental knowledge, Jnana Sanchinna. When one has advanced oneself in the knowledge of transcendental subject matter, then his doubts will be vanquished. And then third is Atmavantam na karmani. So one who is situated firmly in self, Atmavantam. So now when one acquires these three qualities, when one is working, he is not working for any fruits of his action. When one is working with full knowledge, by which all the doubts are cleared off. And finally, when one is firmly situated in the self, then nibaddanti karmani. Then he is not bound by the works. Whatever activities he is doing, he is not bound up. And Krishna is referring to Arjuna as Dhananjaya, O conqueror of riches. So when Yudhishthira Maharaj was performing Rajasuya Yajna, a lot of wealth was required to perform a yajna. It's not easy. And Arjuna was able to bring a lot of riches, and therefore is also addressed as Dhananjaya. So let us try to look some important aspects as how this is actually talking about art of work. How should we work? And usually when people work, they're bound up by the reactions of the work. And we will discuss this aspect of how to work, what it means to be bound up by work, and how to free oneself from the bondage of works. So before, we'll come back to this purport a little later. So let us start with so this is the image that was there in the poster, and Srila Prabhupada explains a short story about what these two women are doing. So we'll come to the end. So actually this is a clue to the art of work. Okay. And we'll come towards the end as why Prabhupada mentions about women carrying water pot. So let us move to today's verse in more detail. So basically this verse is summarizing who is not bound by works. So everyone is working, but people are getting bound by the works that they are performing. So the three aspects: one who has renounced the fruits of his action, whose doubts are destroyed by transcendental knowledge, and who is situated firmly in the self. So let us try to understand first what does bondage of work mean? And why bondage of work is not good for us? And then we will slowly try to understand what does renunciation of one's fruits mean, and subsequently the other 2 points. So bondage. So here Prabhupada in the Ishopanishad verse 2 is also a wonderful verse which describes about how a person should live eternally. What kind of work if one performs, he can live eternally, or he should live eternally. So here in this purport, Srila Prabhupada brings very important points. So Prabhupada is explaining what is karma bandhanaha. Karma bandhanaha. Or, so this word bondage could also mean, in other terms, slavery. So one becomes a slave. So here, the living being is eternal by nature, but due to his bondage in material existence, he has to change his body over and over. This process is called transmigration of the soul, or karma bandhanaha, bondage by one's work. So what this is saying is that the living being is eternal by nature. Now, the living entity is not supposed to die. The living entity is supposed to exist always. But in the material world, we see that the living entity is vanquishing. Now with COVID, everyone is talking about death. Oh, this person has died. He should not have died. We should do everything to protect his life. Why? Why is that no one wants to die? Because the nature of the soul is to live forever. But in this material world, one has to die. So that is something that is unnatural. Now one has to question, why am I taking birth and why am I suffering with this death? That is because of our bondage to material existence. Because we are bound by our activities to material existence, the Lord and the material nature provides us with another body. So each of our activities that we are doing, they are either helping us to become free from material existence, or they're making us bound to the material existence. This is very important to note. So here it is being said that because of our bondage, how does that bondage take place? By our activities. And because of the bondage, the living entity moves from one body to another body. And therefore it is also known as karma bandhanaha. So basically, the living entity is bound by his activities to the material existence. There is material existence, there is living entity. And what is the binding factor? One's activities. So next, it is also said, if work is binding, shouldn't one work for livelihood? So if people will ask, oh, you say that I work, there is bondage. Should I give up the work completely? So Prabhupada also explains in the same purport that living entity has to work for its livelihood, because that is the law of material nature. And if he does not act according to his prescribed duties, he transgresses the law of nature and binds himself more and more to the cycle of birth and death in the many species of life. So Prabhupada is saying one should not artificially give up work, because one has got body, one has to maintain body. Because one has family, one has to maintain family. But what is not to be done, that will be discussed. So maintaining family, maintaining livelihood is not condemned. That is not wrong. But what is wrong is to attach oneself to this material world or to the activities of material life. That is not wanted. So in another place, Prabhupada says, you give education to your children, that is required. You maintain your wife, that is also required. No negligence, but no attachment at the same time. So Prabhupada is saying, you can give education to your children, you can maintain your family, and no negligence in that part, but no attachment at the same time. No attachment that I shall sacrifice everything for my wife and children and home. but one should take care of them, but not in a way that I will give up everything only for the sake of my family, only for the sake of maintaining my children. No, that is not Mahatma's business, because he knows that he cannot improve the destiny. So Prabhupada is mentioning that beyond a point, actually one cannot change one's destiny. Everybody has got his body with certain destiny already settled up. That you cannot change. Otherwise, everyone is trying to become very rich, very important. There is no scarcity of endeavor, but not that everyone is becoming like that. That is called destiny. So Prabhupada is saying, excuse me, that one should work for livelihood, one should perform one's prescribed duties, but not in a way that one becomes attached to the material world, not that one becomes attached to one's family, not that one becomes attached to one's own children. Because Prabhupada is mentioning that everyone is destined, because of their past activities, they have got certain body and they can obtain certain destinies, certain positives and certain negatives, certain happiness and certain distress that we cannot change. So becoming too attached is not recommended. So therefore, now the question comes, how should one work? So so how should one work, and what is the significance of how to work? The significance of how to work is that in the other forms of life, apart from human form of life, they are driven by their instincts. They do not have that freedom of choice to make as what is right, what is wrong, what is liberation, what is bondage. They have no conception of this knowledge. But in the human form of life, the living being gets a chance to get free from the chains of karma. In all their forms, the living entities are bound by their activities. And by the nature's course of action, they move from one life to another life to another life, but they all remain within the material existence. But in the human form of life, one has got this ability to act in such a way that he can be freed from attachment to material existence, and thereby get a chance to cut the knots of all his karma. So this is a very important point to recognize, that this human form of life is very special, where he can recognize how to get liberated from the material existence. So it is important now, let us try to understand the distinction between karma and karma yoga. So this verse starts with yoga sannyasta karmanam. So the word yoga is very important to understand. And Prabhupada is translating the word yoga here as devotional service and karma yoga. So let us try to understand what the word karma mean and what does the word karma yoga mean. So actions that are performed in terms of one's prescribed duties, as mentioned in the revealed scriptures, are called karma. So as we know in Bhagavad Gita, I think in earlier chapters, maybe third chapter, there was this elaborate description of karma, akarma, and vikarma. So akarma means it gives us the pious results, or elevates us onto heavenly planets because of one's performance of prescribed duties, whereas vikarma takes one down to lower species of life or lower planetary systems, and whereas akarma is one that frees one from the bondage of material reactions to the work. So karma also can loosely mean that any activity performed for a gain. In other words, in this material world, everyone is performing certain activity so that they have some material gain, some sense gratification. If there is no remuneration, no one will work. Everyone is toiling so hard in their companies because the idea is that the money that is so, which is sweeter than honey, will give me sense gratification, will give me some enjoyment. And therefore, one is performing such hard labor, especially in Kali Yuga, it is said, people are made to work very, very hard for so little gain. So because the idea is that by that work I will enjoy, which is such an illusion, but still one cannot come out of it. So everyone in this world is working to get some result. But whereas Karma yoga means to act not to satisfy one's own senses, but to satisfy the Supreme Lord. So here in yoga, the word yoga refers to connection with the Supreme Lord. So the word yoga is also means union, or the linking of oneself with the Supreme Self. Now, there are in other words, Srila Prabhupada also defines yoga means to become God conscious. So by any means, if one becomes God conscious, Prabhupada says that is yoga. Now, Prabhupada classifies yoga to be of three kinds in general: the Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. So, Jnana Yoga means that one is trying to understand one's own true self by cultivation of knowledge. And in Karma Yoga, by one's activity, one is trying to become God conscious, or one is trying to connect with the Supreme Lord by one's own activities. That is called Karma Yoga. And Bhakti Yoga means the Navavidya Bhakti process, where one does Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam. So one is chanting, remembering, and doing activities which are favorable, which pleases the Supreme Lord directly. So here in this verse, the verse is saying Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam. So usually everyone is working so that either individually one is happy, or one is trying to satisfy one's own family, one's own nation, one's own community. Or Prabhupada says, even if one is working to maintain international or the entire world, or even the entire planetary system, that is still binds one to the material world, because that does not make one free from the reactions of material work. So whether either one is working for one's own self or an extended self, all those activities fall in the category of material work. Whereas if one works for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, then that frees one from the reactions. Now, Prabhupada also says that there is this distinction between karma and karma yoga is very important to note. So karma means to satisfy one's own senses or extended senses, whereas karma yoga means whatever work you are engaging in for the pleasure of the Lord. So example Srila Prabhupada gives that everyone has to engage some energy. Now, in the case of Arjuna, he was a warrior. Now, he engaged his own skills of work, or the ability to fight, to please Krishna. And in that, he became a yogi. He became, in fact, the greatest yogi. So Krishna did not tell him to stop his work, but rather he performed his work in such a way so that it pleased the Supreme Lord, and therefore he was the greatest yogi. So similarly, it is important to note that if we transform our consciousness, so Prabhupada says that when you're working, if you change your consciousness, you can become a yogi. If you do not change your consciousness in the right way, then you will become a karmi. So from the same action with different consciousness, one is karmi, one is yogi. So that change of consciousness is so important. And here one principle that is being said is that one renounces the fruits of one's action. Yoga sanyasta karmanam. So the point here is when one works in such a way that one offers the results to the Supreme Lord, when one works in such a way so that one is thinking, will this action please the Lord? Will this action please the spiritual master? Is the result is for them? If one is working with that consciousness, then it is karma yoga. So Prabhupada also says that when you work for Krishna, when you work in Krishna consciousness, that work is perfect. So Prabhupada again and again says in different places, so if one works with Krishna consciousness, then one's life is perfect. And Prabhupada gives example. One may ask this question, why should one work for Krishna? So that's where this important, the second point, whose doubts are destroyed by transcendental knowledge. So this is very important because there will be doubt. Oh, why are you asking to work for Krishna? Why should I not work for my own gratification, my own extended family? If not for myself, I'm working for my extended family, or I'm working for some community or some nation. So why are you asking me to work for Krishna? And therefore the doubts will come. And then one has to equip oneself with transcendental knowledge. So when one acquires transcendental knowledge, those doubts will vanquish. And how do we acquire transcendental knowledge? And by that, what happens is that we will understand why I should work for Krishna. So we need to understand, what does this transcendental knowledge mean? So this entire chapter is named Transcendental Knowledge. As we saw, firstly it describes what is the position of Krishna. And then we need to understand Krishna is the supreme controller. Ishvaraha Paramaha Krishna. There is Asamardhaha. There is no one equal or greater than him. So that is the position of Krishna. He is the supreme controller of the entire universe. He is the supreme, there is no one equal or greater than him. And what is our position? Our position is Mamaeva Amsha Jiva Bhuta Jiva Loka Sanatanaha. We are part and parcel, Amsha. We are a small, tiny part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. And we are not superior. We are not superior. We are not supreme controller. We may be able to control a little bit in our own lives and something here and there, but we are not really controllers. We are controlled by three modes of material nature. We are controlled by the Supreme Lord. In that sense, we are not the absolute controller. And therefore, we should know that as my position is inferior to the Supreme Lord, and Supreme Lord is all kind, I need to worship the Supreme Lord. So, and just like Prabhupada gives this example quite often, that if there is a big tree and you want to nourish that big tree, if you pour water to the root, then the entire plant is nourished, entire tree is nourished. But if you try to individually pour water into each leaf and try to nourish the plant, it doesn't work. Similarly, Prabhupada also gives the example of the hand, that if the hand works for the body, both the body and the hand, so the hand gets nourished. So the job of the hand is to nourish the body. Similarly, by transcendental knowledge, we'll come to know that I am part of Krishna and I am a small energy of Krishna, just like the hand is a part of the body. And similarly, if I engage my energies in serving Krishna, that is the rightful use of my energy. So that is where getting this transcendental knowledge destroys those doubts and thereby allows one to work for Krishna. So, so that is another important point, that we have to, if we do our activities in knowledge for Krishna, that is perfect work. And Prabhupada also says that each one of us have got some work and we are engaging in different ways. But if that work is engaged for spiritual realization, or if that energy is transferred for Krishna, then that energy is beneficial. And that is, as we see in this verse, does not bind one to the works. Rather, it frees one from the material enjoyment. Now, further, as we see in this verse, that how can one attain transcendental knowledge? So as we saw what is transcendental knowledge, and Prabhupada in the purport is explaining this very simply by saying, one who follows the instruction of the Gita as it is imparted by the Lord, the personality of Godhead himself, becomes free from all doubts by the grace of transcendental knowledge. So where do we get this transcendental knowledge? If we simply hear, do the instructions of Krishna as given in Gita, we will acquire the required transcendental knowledge to free oneself from the bondage, free oneself from all the doubts. So, until unless we do not hear the message of the Supreme Lord through the right parampara system, one can never free oneself from the doubts. And therefore, this is a very fortunate process, because in various religions, yesterday I was meeting Imam, and they do not have this parampara system. And therefore, they are in doubts. So they are confused whether is this correct or that is correct. What is to be done, what is not to be done. So there is a lot of speculation. There is no definitive answer that this is how it is to be done. There is doubts. But whereas we are fortunate to have Srila Prabhupada coming in the parampara system. So from when one hears from a bona fide spiritual master, all doubts gets vanquished. All answers one will receive. Now, so that's why it is said here, Jnana Sanchinna Samshayam. So when one is equipped with the transcendental knowledge, all the doubts will vanquish. Next, the third point that is being mentioned here is Atmavantam na karmani, Atmavantam. So to be situated in the self. So this is another important principle, that if one is situated in the knowledge of self, that means one recognizes that I'm spirit soul, I'm not this body, I'm not this matter. I'm supposed to work in such a way so that I am, who is a part of the Supreme Lord, I re-establish my relationship with Him. That is my perfection of life. That is the source of true happiness. That is my constitutional position. So every living entity, not knowing the constitutional position of the soul, is performing so many different kinds of dharmas, thinking that I'm a family man, so my first dharma is to perform family. Some other dharma, society is my important point of reference, and therefore I should serve my community, and so on and so forth. But these are all conditional. Whereas the Prabhupada uses these two words wonderfully. One is called conditional, and another is called constitutional. So there are so many conditional duties that may be there. But in other words, there is paradharma and there is aparadharma. That means there is a constitutional duty and there is a conditional duty. So one may be engaged in certain kind of conditional duty by one has to maintain one's family. That's all right. But one should not forget one's constitutional duty. That means one should not forget that he is self, is not this body. He's meant to develop his love for Krishna. One must develop one's relationship with Krishna. That is one's true constitutional dharma. And if one forgets that and just gets caught up in material consciousness, in conditional consciousness, then one cannot liberate oneself from one's actions, from the reactions of one's actions. And therefore, it is being said in this verse that if Prabhupada says in the purport in the second half that he, as part and parcel of his Lord, in full Krishna consciousness, is already established in self-knowledge. So when one becomes Krishna conscious, one acts in Krishna consciousness, automatically the knowledge of one's own self becomes evident. And when one is working with that understanding that I am part and parcel of the Supreme Lord and my actions are meant for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, it is not meant for my sense gratification, then immediately one is free from bondage to the activities one is performing. Yagnardhat karmano anyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha. So if yagnardhat, if one is performing as a sacrifice to the Supreme Lord, then the reactions of the works do not bind one. So this is some of the aspects that are mentioned in this verse. Now, if one can perform activities, then the question may come, how can I perform my activities when I'm filled with so many other responsibilities? Yesterday, I was talking to one devotee who's practicing here. He's a Western devotee. So I asked him, why don't you do a little more services? Then he immediately said, I'm bound with so many other things. I cannot do more. Then, as we saw, Prabhupada explains this art of work. how one should work in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada gives this example of women carrying water pots. So Prabhupada says that in India, the women carry water from the well and they keep on the head. They are going, but the head is so balanced that the water pot will never fall down. There are many instances that if you learn how to keep the balance in spite of your movement, the water pot and the head will not fall. Similarly, if you mold your life in such a way that Krishna should always be remembered, then in spite of your mind being very agitated, your mind will be fixed up in Krishna. That is required. So, in other words, Srila Prabhupada is saying one may be occupied with different things, but one must learn the art of how to fix one's mind in Krishna. Sometimes people think that, oh, I'm doing a lot of yoga, I'm doing a lot of services, I'm doing so many different things. So, but the point is, am I remembering Krishna? Is my mind agitated by different circumstances, or is my mind being drawn to Krishna? And when am I working, am I thinking whether this work will please Krishna, or am I doing with some other consciousness? So Prabhupada is telling that one must learn this art, that whatever work is one is doing, one should always remember Krishna. One should become Krishna conscious. One must think, will this please Krishna? And one should know that the activities that are performed should be for the pleasure of Krishna. The result should be given to Krishna, not that one should be so much attached to the result. That in other place it is said that if one is attached, then one has to undergo the consequences or the reactions to the work. But on the other hand, if one is working in Krishna consciousness for the pleasure of the Lord, then there is no reaction to the work that one is performing. So therefore, this is a wonderful lesson that Srila Prabhupada is helping us to understand, that Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atma Nivedanam. So there are 9 processes of devotional service, and Srila Prabhupada has given us this wonderful program of chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, staying in the association of devotees, hearing Bhagavata Katha. Now, in this way, if we engage our mind, if we simply chant 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra attentively and read Srila Prabhupada's books and follow the morning program and other program given by the temple, then what happens if we do it sincerely, seriously, and attentively, then our mind will be fixed on Lord in spite of doing our daily activities. So that is the test we all need to see while working. Are we thinking of the Lord? Are we molding our lives in such a way that we can remember the Lord? Are we doing our activities for the pleasure of the Lord? So in that way, if one starts working, then one is free from the material bondage or the reactions or the another body, material body that one has to take because of one's activities will not happen. So that is about this verse. So just to summarize in this verse, Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam. So this verse is talking about one should give up, one should renounce the fruits of one's activities. So one should not try to independently enjoy one's own fruits. Rather, one should work in Krishna consciousness for the pleasure of Krishna and offer results to the Krishna. And that is a very important principle. And second, Jnana Sanchinna Samshaya. By acquiring transcendental knowledge. And how does one acquire transcendental knowledge? One acquires transcendental knowledge by hearing the instructions of the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, as given in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. By hearing these instructions, we acquire the transcendental knowledge. And by that transcendental knowledge, all our doubts will vanish as why we should serve Krishna, why should we work for Krishna. So all those kind of doubts will vanquish, and one will be situated in rightful consciousness of work. And finally, one has to be situated in Atmavantam. One has to be fixed up in spiritual life. So one must recognize that I'm not this body, I'm spirit, soul, and as part and parcel of Supreme Lord, all my activities, all my energies are meant to serve the Supreme. So with that consciousness, when one is performing the activities, then one is freed from all the reactions of one's life. That is a brief summary of today's class. Any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
I have two questions, Prabhu. So the first one is, it is said now, renunciation of the fruitive action, fruits of the action, right? So let's assume if a person is applying for a job and preparing for a course, or planning to establish a business, and he or she has been planning for several months, and then established a business, and it has run into losses, or the resultant is a loss. Let us assume that. So how should we conduct ourselves in that respect, and without any attachment? Should we think that it is a plan of the God and then leave all the losses pertaining to the public or self or the family, resources, everything?
There was some disturbance. Can you restate last two statements that you made?
Yes, Prabhu. So how should we conduct in our mind in that times of loss with respect to the energy, time, and resources spent? Because when you establish a business or a job or anything, there are many expectations for that, right? So just in case, I'm just assuming that. Were you able to get my question, Prabhu?
Okay, so let me rephrase your question. So are you saying if there is a loss in a business, how should one think or how should one understand that?
Yes, Prabhu. Because it is said now, the resultant of the actions are not to be attached, right?
Yes.
It should be renounced to the God. So please explain that or help me understand clarity.
Okay, so there is a nice verse. In fact, Srila Prabhupada's life, if you read, so at one point of time, Srila Prabhupada was having a chemical factory, and the entire factory was burnt down in fire. So Srila Prabhupada, in reflection, when he is discussing with devotees, he refers to this verse. He says, "Yasyaham anukrinami harishye tad dhanam sanai tatho adhanam tyajati asya swajana dukkha dukkhitam." So this is a very famous verse which Srila Prabhupada quotes. He says that the Supreme Lord says, in fact, this is a verse said by the Supreme Lord in 10th canto, that if I especially favor someone, I gradually deprive him of his wealth. Then the relatives and friends of such a poverty-stricken man abandon him. In this way, he suffers one distress after another. So, so sometimes it is said that it is the mercy of the Lord. So Lord sometimes takes away the material opulence or the material, what do you call the, it could be material wealth, it could be beauty, or the different kinds of opulences Lord takes away. Now by this, he will see that his own family members no more respects him. His own friends and relatives will abandon him. Now, this is meant for him to become more closer to the Lord. So in case of the devotee, the Lord is doing everything to bring him closer and closer to the Lord. And therefore, a devotee is not worried. Rather, he sees, oh, it is Lord's mercy that if I had all this wealth, maybe I would have been more engaged in sense gratification. Maybe I would have forgotten the Lord. But I'm thankful that, because usually one who has a lot of material wealth, they cannot think of the Lord because there's so much an anxiety about how to handle their wealth, how to do this, how to plan for that, and so many things they get trapped in. But someone who has nothing to worry about all those things, he can save his time from so many unwanted things and focus on the Lord. So, so in case of devotee, even if there is loss, that is Lord's mercy. And when Lord takes away everything, that especially material things, that is a special mercy of the Lord. Does that help?
Yes, Prabhu. Thanks a lot for this, Hare Krishna. And the second question, if I'm allowed to.
Yes, yes.
When you said any action to be pleased for the sake of Lord, I mean, so let us say, I mean, in order to conduct this conditional material life, you need to educate your child and all these things, and you need to construct a house.
Yes.
Yes. But sorry, Prabhu, please bear with this system.
No.
So it can be a basic house or it can be a very grandiose house as well, right? But how does that a grandiose house is pleasing the Lord? Because it is actually for our sense gratification. Can you please explain this? I mean, if you get my question. We are trying to actually make so many houses or all these material opulences, right?
Yes.
To meet our general criteria or needs.
Mm-hmm.
But we're actually making more than the basic need.
Mm-hmm.
So how is this bondage or these earnings pleasing the Lord actually?
So Srila Rupa Goswami gave a practical formula where if especially the Grihastha devotees, if they earn money, they should give 50% to the Vaishnavas, and they should keep 25% for themselves and 25% for emergencies. So in this way, if one can divide one's wealth, in that way, one is safe from material bondage. So because there is no way we can know how much to keep. So that's why Rupa Goswami is giving a formula that 50% engage in Lord service, 50% for relative family members, 25% for relatives and family members, and 25 for some emergency. So that is a simple formula. If you can follow, that's safe and good.
Okay. Is it pre-tax or after tax?
That's a good question.
I'm not trying to
1 second.
overrule this question, but just
It's more 50%.
Ye-
Before tax, after tax.
Yes.
So the principle is whatever we have after the paying the tax, 50% of that. But when you donate that remaining 50%, you save tax. So the savings also you have to give 50%. So overall, if your average tax rate is around 30% tax rate, then your donation amount will come to around 0.4 to 42% of income.
That was Balram explaining further on that point.
No, I mean, there was kind of an echo, Prabhu. I mean, it's a long voice. I couldn't get.
Okay. So anyway, I'll help you answer this again by Prabhu. But the point here is 50% of whatever you have, you should make a donation you should use that for the service of the Lord.
Sure, Prabhu.
Yes.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, very nice session. But I just wanted to discuss few things, whatever I know. So today we discussed karma bondages, right? So what is my understanding is these bondages are getting created by tendencies of human being. So whenever we do some work, it creates some tendencies, and our soul, which is eternal property of God, is getting attached to these tendencies, and these tendencies cause the bondages to that particular soul for birth and death life cycle. So our motto is get free from all these tendencies, nothing but the bondages getting created. So nothing but that we say akarma means we're doing something in the material world, but we are not getting bonded. As a soul, we are already free to the Krishna consciousness. So what is my understanding is the soul should get operate in Krishna consciousness. So there is a change of consciousness from human being to spirit soul existence. So that change should come through experience.
So that transformation comes with knowledge and acting for Krishna. That is what this verse is saying. So if you're working, now you get a result. Now, are you enjoying the result or are you giving to Krishna? So if you
Right.
give to Krishna, then you are freeing yourself from the reaction. Just like the hand is giving food to the mouth, the whole body is nourished, your hand is also nourished. But if the hand thinks only I should work for myself, I should not give anything to the mouth, then there is a problem. So in the material world, in the conditioned state of life, people are thinking, if I save money for myself, my family, if I hold a lot of money, if I have a lot of material wealth, only then I will be happy. Only then I will be able to enjoy. This is material conception. Because of this wrong conception, one is creating a certain kind of thinking by which is thinking the happiness is by performing another material act, acting for one's own self. And because of this work in the material consciousness, one is creating another body. Because there is a material desire, there has to be a body, material body, to enjoy that material desire. And because of that, one has to undergo the suffering of the material life. But if one works for Krishna, in Krishna consciousness, then one is not bound by the effects or the reactions of the material work, and therefore one does not require to take another material body. Now his activity is spiritual, akarma. Akarma means there is no reaction to it. That means if you do akarma, you will not get another material body, but rather you will get a spiritual body. That means freedom from the reaction of material work, from the bondage of material existence.
Right, Prabhu. So the first thing is whatever, as we know that we have to surrender this I, me, and myself. So that is the
That has
first
to be
thing.
done practically.
Right, right.
So results has to be given to Krishna in the first stage. So we are trying to accumulate all the results for ourselves. The first thing is give results to Krishna. Whatever work you are doing with knowledge, all this is coming from Krishna. My body, my energy is meant for Krishna. So if that practically one demonstrates, then one can give up the I, me. Otherwise, it's only a theoretical thinking.
Right, right, right. So everything is God's property. So everyone should have faith on that. It's God's property, and then only it will release this surrender this I, me, and myself.
Yes, yes. Without practical action, there is no freedom from this I and mine.
Right, right. So thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. So tomorrow we have same session.
Yes, tomorrow morning we have Srimad Bhagavatam class at 7:45 a.m. and 7:15 a.m. we have Kirtans, Darshanarti and Guru Puja. And then at evening 7:15 Kirtans and 7:30 p.m. Bhagavad Gita class.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Any other questions or comments? Okay, if there are no questions or comments, I would request everyone to come in front of camera. Let us all chant Hare Krishna mantra once. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare
Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Krishna,
Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
Gita ki.
Jai.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Ishika.
Hare Krishna.
When did you come?
Hare Krishna.
To say Hare Krishna, you joined, or did you join for the entire class?
I am at the end of class.
Towards the end of the class. How are you?
Good.
Good. Good. Did you have your dinner?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Good.